define science and define probe.
Such as researching medicines, cures for diseases, preserving life.
I've got a funny attitude to that. I'm a bit like George Orwell. George Orwell said, we all die. Some doctors say they just put death off. Lots of drugs are supposedly based in science, and I don't think they are. And also, the fact that you remain, well, your heart continues to beat, doesn't mean to say that you're necessarily really alive. So there are all sorts of questions involved with a question like that.
I think there certainly is. As a medical researcher, we realise it's very important that all of our studies are kind of ethically approved. There's definitely a compromise between the quality of the research and the knowledge that can be gained from it, the benefit that can be gained from research, compared to the discomfort or pain to the patient, risk.
No, not for me.
No.
Should be allowed to probe. I think it's important to have bodies that uphold ethics in science, and I think when you see people like Dame Mary Warnock, who chair committees that look at the moral dimensions of new scientific research and new discoveries and new technologies. In medicine, for example, I think they are a mark of our maturity as a culture and as a civilization, that we can subject our progress to that kind of scrutiny. I don't think there are any areas in which science should be precluded from investigating. But of course, it's the end use of it. The science of genetics has brought great advances in treatment of illness. But it also could be turned to purposes of eugenics as well, which I don't agree with. So, the moral dimension of science is probably different from what you might call a religious or spiritual dimension, but I think that has to be in place for it to work properly for the benefit of all.
There are no limits to what science should be allowed to probe. There are obviously ethical and moral limits to the ways in which scientists are allowed to do that.
Absolutely not. I wouldn't mind betting within 100 years we will have created life, much earlier than that, but much more complex organisms within 100 years. I think that's reasonable. I think that's good. Whether we should deploy it as a technology, whether we should use it, is a matter for society, not for scientists alone. It's for everybody else to share in the discussion. But for probing, definitely no limits.
No, there should be no limits at all. Science is free, and look at the enormous technological advancement, the scientific advancement that mankind has made in the last 50 to 100 years. It's absolutely phenomenal. And man has to an inquiring mind to be a scientist. I'm a scientist. I'm a qualified scientist. And you always probe, and you search, and you make discoveries, and all these are for the enhancement of man's progress. Otherwise, man would become static and would fall foul of the laws of nature itself, because we are dictated to by nature, by our society, by our parents, by our nations, to continue to discover new things for the betterment of mankind. And I subscribe to the scientific view enormously, A, because I'm a scientist, and B, because my faith motivates me.
Not probe, but there are scientific conclusions and there are sociological and philosophical conclusions. So philosophical points can't actually be solved by scientific probes, whereas matters of fact can.
Life is a gift, and it's a very precious gift. And to preserve that gift, we must do our utmost to ensure that we are able to do that by taking any medication that is helpful, by taking any advice, by seeing any consultants, but avoiding, you've got to be sure, avoiding medicines and treatments which have not been scientifically tried. A lot of people go to these quack practitioners and they mislead them, they give them the wrong kind of medication, they believe they'd benefit, but they don't. So you've got to draw a line. Any medicine, yes, but the medicine has to be absolutely tested and approved. It's got to be scientific and not coming from dubious sources which could lead to harm.
Not necessarily, just depend. If I've got cancer and my quality of life was pretty rubbish, then I would, as the religious people say, be quite happy to meet my maker. Because I'm going to die sometime, so if it's going to be pain and suffering all the way there, I'd just as well die now. Unless I wanted to die, I would. Yes, but there are circumstances in which one might want to die.
Yeah, I would.
Yep.
Yeah.
If it was to prolong, definitely save my life and give me certainty. If it was going to give me 5 or 6 weeks extra life, I think there's an argument to be had as to whether I would consider that a worthwhile existence or not.
I think I would, yes. Well, I do it every day, actually, with insulin.
Yes.
Yes.